Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to KT Connects. For those who are new to attending, KT Connects is a monthly knowledge translation, skills, and best practices webinar series co-hosted by Arthritis Research Canada and Michael Smith, Health Research BC. My name is Kevin Sauvé, Program Manager for Health Research BC's Science Initiative.
And I'm Cody Primo, Assistant Professor at Western University and former postdoctoral fellow with Arthritis Research Canada. And we will be the co-hosts and co-presenters for today's webinar, our final in a year-long series that focuses on open science. Now, a few things to note before we get started. The first 30 minutes will be a presentation summarizing what we've learned about open science over the past year. That will be followed by a 15-minute roundtable expert discussion with Dr. Linda Lee, Gail Scarrow, and Dr. Sterling Bryan. The final 15 minutes will be a question and answer period. So please use the Q&A dialog box to ask questions for the speakers at any point, to be asked by the hosts to the speakers in the last 15 minutes of the webinar. Before asking your question, please be sure to review the ones that have already been asked and to upvote the ones that you would like to be answered. The chat box is enabled and is intended for you to share your thoughts with fellow participants and the organizers. And to be safe, please do not share any personal information in the chat box. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on Health Research BC's website in the coming week. And if you use social media, please post content about today's workshop and anything about this webinar series using the hashtag KTConnects. Now, before we begin, we want to acknowledge the people who are the stewards of the lands where many of us are located today. Now, Health Research BC and Arthritis Research Canada are situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, now colonially known as Vancouver, Canada. From coast to coast to coast, we want to acknowledge all the Inuit, Métis, First Nation, and Indigenous peoples who have called this land home for many generations. Our aim with KT Connects is to serve as a catalyst for collaborative and collective learning, fostering meaningful discussions, engagement, and partnerships along the way, and to do so in a way that acknowledges and appreciates the people and worldviews that have inspired knowledge generation and use for millennia. So let's consider how we can actively contribute to the vital process of decolonization in our respective fields and our working and daily lives. As Lilla Watson, Murray Aboriginal artist, activist, and academic, has once said, if you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. Please feel free to provide your own personal acknowledgements or commitments to reconciliation in the chat box. Now we have 3 learning objectives for today. When today's webinar is over, we'd like you to be able to describe the key themes and insights from the KT Connects Open Science webinar series and their relevance to health research, to discuss the role of knowledge translation, engagement research, research funding, and policy in advancing open science, and explain how open science can create a more equitable and impactful health research system.
Thanks, Cody. Over the past year, we've hosted 7 open science webinars, not including today's, with 10 different speakers. So Dr. Maria Pawlowska discussed the global shift towards open science and the challenges many jurisdictions have faced in its implementation. Dr. Clara Dern and Alex Haggard explored how open science reduces research waste and helps to address wicked problems through inclusive, equity-driven partnerships. Dr. Nathan Lachowski and Anu Radhaverma highlighted the intersection of community-based research and open science, emphasizing engagement, transparency, and empowerment for 2S LGBTQIA+ communities. Dr. Femke Hoekstra showcased the integration of open science and integrated knowledge translation, IKT, to enhance spinal cord injury counseling and knowledge sharing. Dr. Kelly Kobe examined how research assessment reforms can align with open science to improve transparency, integrity, and equity in academia. Dr. Juan Pablo Alperin and Dr. Alice Fleerakers discussed the role of preprints in open science, their use by journalists, and best practices for responsible communication of science. And Dr. Shannon Freeman presented how open science and partnered approaches to research can enhance health equity and outcomes for aging populations in rural and remote communities. Over the course of today's webinar, we'll hear from each of them again in clips that we've recorded from their presentations. So please ensure that your volume is turned up and that you can hear that well.
Kevin, I think that the slides aren't showing up. Are we able to get those on the screen?
Apologies.
No problem.
How's that?
Great. Thank you.
Sorry about that, everybody. Okay, so why a series on open science? For one, health systems globally are grappling with increasingly complex yet interrelated health challenges like climate change, pandemics, and aging populations, for which more accessible, transparent, and cooperative knowledge production is needed. Meanwhile, new technologies are rapidly evolving that enable large-scale data collection, rapid information analysis, and widespread knowledge dissemination and communication. On one hand, such technologies are calling into question a reliance on an antiquated system of scholarly publishing that is slow and inaccessible to many. On the other, it is posing new challenges for individual privacy, data security, and intellectual property. Simultaneously, like much of society, science and academia are grappling with their own shared histories of exclusion and exploitation that have limited access and participation in research, jeopardizing public trust and understanding of science. This is raising important questions about how science and research should be conducted, shared, evaluated, and funded, and who should be included. Our series explored the foundations of open science, its practices, its principles, how it aims to address societal challenges and meet new opportunities, where and how it is being implemented and where it is not, within healthcare and healthcare systems and health research systems, ultimately how it intersects with the shared interests of knowledge translation and mobilization. But what exactly is open science? Each of the speakers really helped us to gain a better understanding of it. As we clearly heard from Doctors Maria Pawlowska and Kelly Kobe, open science is often thought of as, but includes much more than, open access publishing, which is journals making research articles freely available or low cost to readers. It is actually a cultural movement or an umbrella term for a set of practices and principles that enhance accessibility of the entire research system through greater transparency and collaboration in every step of the research cycle, from ideation and hypothesis generation, data collection and analysis, to research publication and knowledge translation. The idea here being that with greater accessibility, transparency, and collaboration comes greater reproducibility, relevancy, and validity, leading to more reliable scientific research system, encouraging public trust in science and more evidence-informed decision-making. It's been the focus of several national and international governance bodies around the world for more than a decade. Canada, for example, has published a roadmap to open science, illustrated here on the left. And as we heard from Dr. Kobe, the tri-agency funders have taken steps along this road with policies, resources, and infrastructure. UNESCO's Open Science Recommendation, published in 2021, the graphic on the right, was referenced most frequently in our series and highlights many of the same practices and principles, including open knowledge, infrastructure, and engagement. Open knowledge includes open data and publications, software, code, educational resources, as well as non-proprietary hardware and materials. Open infrastructure includes virtual and physical resources such as remote or on-site access to instrumentation such as DNA sequencers and telescopes, for example. Open engagement includes knowledge exchange and dialogue with other knowledge systems and an emphasis on participatory approaches across the research cycle. Here's Dr. Kobe further elaborating on the concept of open science by contrasting it with the way that science is currently practiced. Have a listen.
I've just told you that open science is a movement and practice to conduct research more transparently. So by necessity of that statement, it means that open science is not the current norm or status quo within research. So open science is not science. And I think that's really problematic because I think transparency, I think the average member of the public would think would be a cornerstone of research conduct, design, and reporting. And I think we're falling short in really maintaining that sort of trust in achieving that level of transparency. So I think that one day I certainly hope that when we say science, open science is sort of integral to that core. But right now we live in a society where science tends to be fairly closed, and especially when it comes to data, we're quite protectionist. I've just told you.
It's also important to note that we heard that the term open science doesn't resonate with all communities. The word science itself is challenging to those for whom colonial and patriarchal practices have replaced traditional ways of knowing with the scientific method. And as many of the knowledge translation and mobilization experts in this audience will surely agree, there can be many different terms used in practice that seek to accomplish similar goals, depending on discipline, geography, community, or preference. So, for example, here's Dr. Lachowski explaining the similarities between the concepts of open science and community-based research.
For us, open science is a set of principles and practices. So it's both of these two things, if you can think of this as kind of like theory and practice, that are aimed to make scientific research, and we really argue any form of research from any field, accessible to everyone in order to provide the benefits of that work for society as a whole, and ideally in ways that are advancing social justice. So for us, open science is about making sure that during not only scientific knowledge is accessible, but also that the production of that knowledge itself is inclusive, equitable, and sustainable. And that really aligns with the UNESCO recommendations from 2021 on open science. And so for us, we see these two things as having really the same goals.
So for this webinar series, we did use the term open science and open scholarship and interchangeably, given their use in research and academic communities. That said, we acknowledge the limitations of these words and we recognize the benefit of using alternatives, particularly the ones that resonate best with your respective communities. So let's turn to what we learned about the aims and goals of open science. When we talk about complex or wicked problems, for example, in health research, we mean interconnected and multifaceted challenges like climate change and global pandemics, the solutions for which require multi-sectoral and interdisciplinary collaboration. Here, traditional research methods often fall short due to siloed thinking, duplicated efforts, and a disconnect and mistrust with knowledge users. Open science, as our speakers explained, offers a transformative approach by emphasizing collaboration and inclusivity. Maria, Claire, Alex, Nathan, Anu, Femke, and Shannon all stress the need to dismantle traditional silos in research by engaging a broad spectrum of stakeholders, from academic experts to community members. We can pool diverse perspectives that are critical for tackling multifaceted issues. Kelly, Juan, and Alice reminded us that making data, methods, and preliminary findings openly available, notably via preprints, can help accelerate the research cycle. This transparency not only builds trust, but also invites timely feedback, which is a crucial factor when dealing with rapidly evolving challenges such as pandemics. Dr. Kobe pointed to the rapid development of the COVID-19 vaccine as one example where open data sharing resulted in an expedited scientific and technological innovation. Femke and Shannon showcased examples of how incorporating integrated knowledge translation with open science practices ensures that research is not just theoretically sound, but practically relevant. By involving knowledge users throughout the research process, they developed solutions that worked in real-world settings. In essence, open science can foster genuine partnerships, accelerate innovation, and ultimately equip us to address challenges that no single discipline or institution can solve alone. Here's Claire Ardern emphasizing how open science not only helps to tackle complex problems, but how it also helps to address the problem of research waste.
Wicked problems need us to work together to find complex solutions. Working in silos, in isolation and in silos, is not going to find those complex solutions to solve complex, challenging problems. Open science practices can bring transparency and integrity to the way that research is done and can help us take steps towards finding those complex solutions for complex problems. And part of that is in that open science promotes not doing wasteful research. So it's not unnecessarily duplicating research efforts. I want to distinguish this from replication as a field in research itself. It is really important to make sure that we can replicate research. We don't want to do it unnecessarily though, and that's where open science practice comes in and the distinction is.
So open science practices can also lead to more reliable research and less bias. The speakers pointed to several systemic issues, such as poor clinical trial registration, publication bias, even fraudulent practices that open science is uniquely positioned to address. Doctors Kobe and Ardern noted that, for example, in Canada, a very low percentage of clinical trials meet best practices for registration and reporting. Only a small fraction of trials are prospectively registered and report the results fully. This lack of registration and reporting means that a lot of data, including critical negative findings, never sees the light of day. This wastes resources and in some cases can potentially harm patients. Dr. Ardern further emphasized that when only positive results are published, we end up with a skewed scientific record. Open science encourages the dissemination of all outcomes. By sharing negative and inconclusive results openly, we not only create more balanced evidence, but also reduce the duplication of unproductive efforts. Both Doctors Pawlowska and Kobe discussed how closed systems that prioritize evaluations based on quantitative measures like journal impact factor or H-index can sometimes enable questionable research practices, including fraud, that can often go undetected. When researchers openly share data, protocols, and analysis methods, it is much harder to hide errors or misconduct. This transparency is essential for maintaining the integrity of science. Finally, when data and methods are shared openly, other researchers can verify and build on these findings. This iterative process enhances reproducibility, which is a cornerstone of reliable research. It shifts the focus from quantity, like sheer publication counts, to quality, reproducibility, relevancy, and long-term impact. Open science practices not only help to minimize research waste by ensuring that all outcomes are available, but they also enhance overall reliability of scientific inquiry. By reducing biases and increasing transparency, we foster a more accountable and trustworthy research environment, benefiting both science and society. In talking about the ways that open science can produce more reliable research, Dr. Pablo Alperin pointed to some of the challenges with our current system, including peer review as the gatekeeping system for ensuring quality and reliability. Take a listen.
Peer reviewed is like flawed in so many different ways. Both as a process, who participates, the kinds of things that make it through peer review that are not caught, the gatekeeping and biases that are present in both because of the people that participate, but also because of the practices and norms around what is the sort of publication biases that are inherent. There's so many things wrong with peer review that we know about, that have been studied, and that yet we continue to consider it to be some kind of a standard or measure of quality. It provides no guarantees.
We also heard during our series that open science not only makes research more transparent, but can also help make it more equitable by fostering inclusive, community-driven research partnerships that democratize knowledge production and benefit. Alex Haggard emphasized that traditional science often operates hierarchically. Open science challenges that by promoting knowledge equity, meaning that research is co-produced with communities rather than dictated by established power structures. Nathan Lachowski and Anuradha Verma discussed the value of community-based research. Their approach centers on involving 2S LGBTQIA+ communities, ensuring the lived experiences and priorities of diverse communities directly inform the research process. Both Shannon Freeman and Femke Hoekstra illustrated how integrated knowledge translation can bridge the gap between research and practice by engaging research users, from patients and community members to healthcare professionals and researchers. Among additional interest holders, solutions are co-developed that are responsive and tailored to real-world challenges. The combined insights from these speakers underline that genuine partnerships grounded in transparency and shared decision-making not only helps build trust, but also leads to outcomes that better serve equity-deserving populations. This approach helps ensure that research benefits are widely distributed and directly address community needs, leading to research that is not just innovative, but also inclusive and impactful. Now, in this next video, we have Alex Haggard, who talks a little bit about building blocks of knowledge equity in the lens of open science, and how that fits into the work that Alex does.
Knowledge is not something that is sort of neutral or static. It's really, it's an artifact. It's a social artifact. It's a tool that we use. It is something that we make. It's something that we then use by mobilizing and interpreting and implementing. And all of these things, all of these stages of sort of knowledge usage, knowledge interaction, they really embed power imbalances that are present throughout society.
And in this next video, we have Shannon Freeman, who is talking about the role of evidence and how different sources of information can help inform decision-making with interest holders?
Our interest holders rely really heavily on research evidence, but also on expert opinions and practical experience. And it's when we work in partnership and we combine those levels and those types of ways of knowing together that we really are able to then really make that meaningful impact. So, evidence played a crucial role in assessing the efficacy, the feasibility, and the practical implements of age tech solutions. Um, and so when we're thinking about an open science approach to research, it's key to recognize the value of all of these kinds of research and also at the same time recognize that their use can vary. So for example, our interest holders relied heavily on the research evidence to inform their decision-making process. However, it was expert opinions and the stories of persons with lived experience that played a really significant role in guiding those decisions.
And in this video, we have Femke Hoekstra, who's talking about the relationship between open science and integrative knowledge translation.
Open science provides the framework for transparent research practices, while IKT enhances engagement and relevance by involving research users throughout the research process. And by conducting and disseminating research using those principles, you will really be able to do research that is more accessible, relevant, useful, and will have real world impacts.
Now, despite its benefits, open science can still face barriers related to funding, infrastructure, incentives, academic culture, and public understanding of science, which can hinder its adoption. Several speakers, including Dr. Poloska and Kobe, pointed out that high article processing charges, or APCs, not only create financial burdens on researchers, but also contradict policies that promote immediate open access. The cost barrier is a real issue, especially for researchers with limited funding, given APCs can be thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars. Doctors Poloska and Kobe also noted traditional research assessment systems heavily favor metrics like publication counts and impact factors. These systems often don't adequately reward rigorous work needed for transparent and collaborative practices that open science entail, such as creating data management plans and or community engagement strategies, thereby discouraging these practices. There are also significant concerns about how to share data without compromising privacy or intellectual property. Striking a balance between openness and protecting sensitive information continues to be a delicate issue and priority across disciplines. In particular, ensuring researchers follow community principles, such as the First Nations principles of ownership, control, access, and possession, or OCAP, when working with Indigenous communities, for example, is very important. A recurring theme that was mentioned is that ingrained competitive culture of research, leaving many hesitant to share data openly, for example. This is rooted in longstanding practices related to research evaluation and intellectual property, and about the possibility of publishing erroneous results. And doctors Pablo Alperin and Fleerackers also stressed that public misunderstanding of the scientific process may lead to misinterpretation of preliminary findings in preprints and in data sets, while highlighting the major opportunities that come from preprints. This underlines the need for better communication strategies to ensure that openness translates into informed trust. So in this next video, we have Dr. Poloska that talks about some of these concepts that were discussed in the last slide.
Closed peer review tends to really not necessarily support the best research, but support researchers with networks and particular profile. So if we base how we assess researchers solely on what we are doing generally now, not on how they collaborate, not if they make their data open, not if their research is actually reproducible, not if their research is community engaged and impactful. If we assess it only based on the impact factor of where they published it, open science isn't going to get very far.
And in this next video, we have Anuradha Verma, who talks a little bit about the piece surrounding trust and how that fits into what we just discussed.
We really think that research needs to be moving at the speed of trust, but a reflection that I think many of us are coming up against is that we're often limited by the timelines of funders. So that feels like a complexity and a tension. And then this is a difficult one sometimes, but for some community members, engaging in research will just never, ever feel good. And we need to be able to honor that. And I think that can be a humbling experience.
And in this video, we have Alice Furackers, who talks about how well journalists communicate about preprint research, that being a shared responsibility.
How well journalists communicate about preprint research is really a shared responsibility. Obviously, journalists need to be doing this work. They need to be critical, reflective, asking themselves those important questions about how and when to share research and doing that verification. But it's also up to us as researchers and communicators to support them in doing that. Whether it's by putting out knowledge translation products that help them understand preprint research and the benefits and risks it might bring, but also being responsive, answering their questions, pointing them to resources that could help them do their job better. And perhaps most importantly, and interesting because we've just talked about how different preprints are from other research, this is actually true of all research. Journalists need our support to make sure that they're communicating research in ways that are going to be helpful to society, rather than potentially leading to misinformation. All research can be flawed. All research can be retracted, share findings that are actually hurtful to society. And so many of these lessons we've talked about today are really good to keep in mind in all of your knowledge translation work and all of your interactions with journalists specifically.
Now, as we look ahead, it's clear that advancing open science requires not just new practices, but also strategic, coordinated effort across multiple fronts. And enhancing awareness and training in open science practices is therefore critical. As Doctors Poloshka and Kobe mentioned, many researchers in Canada are not aware of national infrastructure and resources that, for example, can enable better data sharing, such as the FRDR or the Federated Research Data Repository and Borealis platforms, or the Tri-Agency's Data Management Plan Assistant tool. Researchers need institutional support and guidance to develop knowledge and skills in order to adopt open practices effectively. As mentioned by a number of our speakers, we need to shift our research assessment systems if we want researchers to prioritize open science. Currently, traditional metrics like publication counts and journal impact factors dominate institutional evaluation. As was emphasized, transitioning to models that reward community engagement, open access publishing, and data sharing, and embracing frameworks like the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, or DORA, will help incentivize quality, accessibility, inclusion, and transparency over focusing solely on publication measures. Policy alignment is another key area that was discussed. So harmonizing funding and policy frameworks to support open access while reducing the burden of high article processing fees, for example, will be crucial if we expect to have research published in open access journals with immediacy. Coordinated action among institutions, funders, and governments is therefore necessary for us to build a unified research ecosystem that supports open science. And finally, as Dr. Kobe mentioned, establishing robust monitoring and tracking systems is imperative. By creating dashboards and evaluation mechanisms, we can continuously monitor the uptake and impact of open science practices, such as study and trial registration, data sharing, and publication practices, ensuring that progress is measurable and that we can adjust guidelines, frameworks, and policies as necessary. Now, in summary, a coordinated approach that includes comprehensive training, updated incentive structures, harmonized guidelines and policies, and systematic monitoring are essential ingredients for establishing an effective and sustainable open science system.
Cody, So now this brings us to our roundtable. So please allow me to introduce our speakers. And if you guys could come off your camera as I introduce you, that would be great. Dr. Linda Lee is a professor in the Department of Physical Therapy at the University of British Columbia, holding the Harold Robinson Arthritis Society Chair for Arthritic Diseases. She also serves as the Scientific Director for the BC Support Unit at Michael Smith Health Research BC, and is a Senior Scientist at Arthritis Research Canada. Dr. Lee has completed a Canada Research Chair in Patient-Oriented Knowledge Translation and is a Fellow of the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences. Welcome, Linda. Gail Scarrow is the Director of Knowledge Translation at Michael Smith Health Research BC. In this role, she leads the department development, implementation, and evaluation of knowledge translation initiatives. Her aim is to bridge the gap between research evidence and healthcare practice. Her work focuses on facilitating the application of research findings to improve health outcomes and inform policy decisions. And Dr. Sterling Bryan is the Chief Scientific Officer at Michael Smith Health Research BC. He is a health economist with an extensive experience engaging with health policy and decision-making. In 2008, he joined the University of British Columbia as a professor in the School of Population and Public Health, and has served as the director for the Center for Clinical Epidemiology and Evaluation. Dr. Bryan is a fellow of the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences and currently serves as president for the Canadian Association of Health Sciences and Policy Research. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so you can see all these wonderful people. And let's get started with you, Sterling. So perhaps you can just give us some general reflections on what you've heard about open science during the series.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think it's been a really interesting and eye-opening series from my perspective. I've learned a lot about open science through the speakers and the contributions from folks. I think my general overall impression is I guess about the breadth and the scope of open science. Like there's so much that falls under the banner of open science. I find it difficult to, in a sense, sort of have a binary response, like either positive or negative. So there are certainly like aspects of open science that, very easy for us to embrace. I'm trained in economics, so like avoiding waste and inefficiency in research, like gets a strong tick from my perspective. Of course it does. Tackling research fraud through open science. Like no one in their right mind is going to be arguing against the need for us to tackle research fraud. So I think there are undoubtedly like reasons why we want to embrace open science or aspects of open science that can address those issues. But the thing that's on my mind primarily is the sort of incentive piece, and actually like just if we place ourselves in the position of someone, as a faculty member, maybe a sort of early career faculty member, that's obviously not me at this point, but someone who is building a research career, building a research lab, and the sort of like the need to sustain a research team, and what incentives are on those people to embrace open science? What are the challenges that exist? And we heard about some of those, and I think it's important that we reflect on those, and how do we support people in that sort of situation where grant success is critically important, where bringing in research funds in order to pay salaries for research staff is critically important. And how can we support those people to be successful, and yet also to embrace open science? And I don't think that's an easy one for us to sort of circle for us to or loop to close, to be honest. And so I think we need to sort of think through how do we actually really support the development of open science practices for people in that sort of situation. So that's certainly something that's on my mind. I've got lots of other thoughts, but I'll pass it over to my colleagues, then hopefully have an opportunity to share more later.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you, Sterling. We'll come back to you in a bit. Linda, would love to hear what resonated with you during these talks.
Sure. Thank you, Kevin. Like many of us on the panel, we wear multiple hats. So my thoughts come from the multiple hats that I'm wearing. As a knowledge translation implementation scientist, obviously what Dr. Hostra was talking about in terms of the synergistic nature of open science and knowledge translation really resonated with me. My work within the BC support unit under Health Research BC is really get me thinking around the relationship between open science and patient-oriented research. And certainly open science, from the speakers that we've heard in this series, that it highlights the different contributions of to patient-oriented research in terms of enhancing the transparency, the collaboration, and sharing data. It really allow greater scrutiny and productivity of research finding, which I think the value of leading to more reliable, more robust outcomes are really valuable in terms of advancing patient-oriented research. The other piece of a reflection is the aspect of open engagement as a part of open science. And I think, the Open Science Initiative really provide platforms for patients and public groups to directly, be involved in the research process. And Sterling, I hear you, talking about the challenges of early career investigators in terms of supporting the engagement in open science and in the sustainability of it. But I'm also want to bring up, some of the sort of trailblazing, activities that are led by new early career investigators. So I remember reading an article, and now then this move on my last part of reflection, that it was published in PLOS Biology by someone named Rachel Harding. It was about 2018, 2019, and that's an early career scientist. And what they did was to create this open notebook, sort of system that they were publishing lab data, lab result on a daily basis and share with colleagues who are doing, basic science research, especially in rare diseases. And in that article, she described how this open science sharing experience actually helped to, number one, make herself known as an expert, in the field. And secondly, help her to secure grants and awards later on. So I think that's a lot that, we can maybe chat about, and, sort of some of the challenges and some of the really unique opportunities that would not have happened to early career investigators as a part of having open science. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, we'll definitely come back to you for more of your thoughts soon. Gail, what did you pick up on?
Thanks so much, Kevin and Cody. There's a couple of things that really resonated with me. One is a quote from Dr. Claire Ardern and Alex Haggard. They said, "Science is not neutral. It's shaped by who participates, how knowledge is shared, and how it's interpreted." And that's such a powerful reminder of how are we actually, why are we, what are we doing around this important work of producing and using research in a way that is actually going to be fair and equitable and open for everybody. And then the second part of that always is like, when I talk about the us who needs to do this and we need to do things, like who is that? Who is the us that has to do this work, and who are the we's that need to be involved, and who are the individuals? And there's such an onus put on researchers to be the ones to get everything out there. And really, it's everybody has a role in this. I'm with a funder, so funders have a role to play. Researchers have a role to play. The public, the communities, the government, the publishers, like academia. And we do really need to be working much closer together to address this. On our own as silos, we're not going to get anywhere. And I do think that's really what came across quite clearly for me in this. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you all. First, for being here and for your insight so far. And I'm actually going to circle it back to Gail. Sorry, another question for you, Gail. The next question is thinking about your experience and expertise with knowledge translation. How have these seminars informed your thinking about the relationship between knowledge translation and open science?
Yeah, thanks, Cody. Really, they really enforced for me that strong alignment overlap between the two. Now, so many people, when they talk about KT, they talk about dissemination of research findings. And the aim of knowledge translation activities really is to increase uptake of research evidence and practice policy and further research, but it's not just at the end of a study. It really encompasses four major components, which I'm not sure everybody is actually aware of. So there's the synthesis of research evidence is one component of doing knowledge translation, as is that engagement that we've talked about throughout the research cycle with the people who are going to be impacted by that research. There's targeted dissemination, it's only one of those components. And then how do you implement research findings? So when you look at the open science frameworks, they're identifying actions for fair, equitable research. How do you use it? So the same type of aim that KT has is being shown in the frameworks. When you look at the frameworks, there's barriers and facilitators that you can read into these. Like, what are all the barriers to those actions that have been identified in the frameworks? And those barriers and the facilitators you can use towards them are the same barriers that impact knowledge translation activities. So there really is a close alignment between the two. In KT, those activities aim to address it in one way, while open science has other ways to address it. But when you look at those barriers, they're all the same and they all impact the effectiveness of open science and the effectiveness of knowledge translation. So ultimately, I think that's really one of the big things that came across, or where those overlaps and alignments are for me. And as I mentioned earlier about the different people involved, those barriers have to be addressed at an individual and organizational, regional, governmental levels for effectiveness to happen. It's not just picking one thing and doing that and asking one person to do something.
That's interesting, Gail. I think a lot about this question of labels and how we apply them to the different things that we're doing and what we're trying to describe when it comes to particularly getting evidence into practice. Cody, I'm wondering if I can pick on you for a second. It was noted by a few speakers that during the series that many communities prefer different labels than open science. It doesn't necessarily resonate with them, just like as we see in the knowledge translation field. It's not always knowledge translation that's resonating with people in all of the various different ways we're trying to describe these things. So I'm wondering, given your research experience, particularly with citizen science, how we might think and how we might frame the principles and practices of open science and these other things in ways that really resonate with broader and more diverse groups.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. That's I think a really important question for everyone to be thinking about. And we often have ideas on what's being talked about and how it resonates with everyone because a lot of people are talking about it, but that may not necessarily be the case for all communities. And if we think particularly with some demographics and groups of individuals who historically have not had the best relationship with research, where there have been harms in the past, we have to be mindful of how that reflects feelings about research and the terms that we're using to describe research practices and how that fits into the larger picture of community. So I think it really goes back to thinking about the communities that we're working with. And Anu talked about this a little bit in one of the videos, the trust building, rebuilding some trust that may have been lost, building meaningful relationships. And in that process, really trying to maximize opportunities for people with lived experience from community to be involved in that work in an active and meaningful way. And so in doing so, it really helps us identify, what people from community find most important and, what kind of terminology and language is preferred from the community. And so with that, it's letting the community priorities guide the work moving forward. And with that, for individuals who work in research space and clinical spaces, it's the self-reflection piece that's ongoing throughout the process, and seeing how that fits into the larger picture of how we move forward in this idea of open science or community-based research or whatever terminology is preferred by the communities that we're working with. And with that, I might actually go back to Linda and ask Linda a question. So given your work in the patient-oriented research space, what did we learn during this series about how open science can be used more effectively to engage patient and public voices in health research decision making.
Yeah, thanks, Cody. I think just reflecting on your answer as well, describing citizen science, which is one of the ways I think in health research or population health we don't do it as often, but in environmental science and natural science they've done it for a very, very long time. Monitoring air quality, water quality, counting birds. The different types of really interesting research. So the open engagement piece around open science, again, it's the part that I got me thinking a lot about that, there are different ways to create forums for community engagement. The citizen science is one that, as you know, Cody, we sort of started the process with the support from the BC Support Unit to allow us to engage with people who are living with chronic pain, and then subsequently those who are living with long COVID, to share their experiences and use that to help researchers to create meaningful research questions that are actually relevant and important to individuals with the lived experiences, to invest in answering. So that's one way, using technology, digital platform to engage more people. And the other piece that, thinking back a while back when CIHR was funding Café Scientifique, if I'm saying it correctly, that it was an open forum, initiative that for researchers to be able to engage with the public, with patients, with other interest holders, to facilitate dialogues and also share experiences. So having these type of forums for the different groups and from different disciplines and different sectors to be able to engage, understand each other, build research priority, co-designing research, it is really what I think what open science is, under the open science umbrella, is embracing. So in other words, I think open science really help the public and people with lived experiences to have this table to gather around and have a say in the health research decision, and making it easier to also turn research into real world improvement. So I think that comes back to why I was so excited when we were doing this open science series in KT Connects, because this just covers so many things that more people we can engage in this discussion and figure out how to do it better. I think it's better for health research, and it's better for patient and society.
Thanks, Linda. That's great. So taking a look at the time, we've got about 10 minutes left here. We'd like to open it up for questions from the floor as well, from the audience. So please do post your questions in the Q&A box. We've got a couple here right now. First, what efforts are you aware of for making health data easily findable and accessible for research in BC and across Canada? Maybe Sterling, we could look at you for that one.
Sure. So the first thing I would point to in relation to that is the work that we've taken forward and supported with Ministry of Health to create the provincial health data platform. So we do now have an environment in BC that is a home for, or will now be a home for, administrative data and for research purposes, but actually is a place where researchers can actually bring their own data, and linkage then to administrative data is possible. So certainly, I think the developments on the health data side, both provincially as well as nationally. I know that one of our speakers was highlighting, is it Borealis is the platform that's now available nationally for research data to be to be available. One of the things that I think is important to just reflect on the data side is the importance then of when collecting data to make sure that the consents that are given by participants in research actually reflect an ability then to have secondary use of research data as well.
Absolutely. And I think it was Dr. Kelly Kobe who spoke quite a bit about FRDR, FRDR, and Borealis. And I remember her lauding that approach, but saying that it's not quite fit for purpose. So there's quite a bit more work to do in that space, particularly around awareness and letting people know that it exists and it's available for use. I think this is a good follow-up. And you did mention the health data platform, but perhaps could you tell us a bit more about a practical example of how Health Research BC is supporting open science?
Is that for me as well? Okay.
Yeah, any of you. I'm looking at smiles or nods here.
I'll start, and then I'll ask Gail probably to follow up on that. I mean, certainly, we're supporting open science in several ways. I mean, one is like people we fund. We have a requirement for publishing in open access in an open access way. And certainly like this running of this series, for example, demonstrates, I think, a real interest and appetite amongst folks at Health Research BC to explore how we should be moving this forward. Just on the open access, and I just wanted to say I think it's a great example of like unintended consequences that you need to be aware of when you put policy forward. Like the article processing charge, which I think it's not the right name for what we have, like because it doesn't the charge that's get made by publishers. I haven't seen anything that actually demonstrates that it reflects the true cost of open access publishing. But I mean, what's happened is an unintended consequence of that, of course, is that academic publishing has become one of the most profitable industries in the world, and this was pointed out as part of this series. That certainly was not the intent, but has been an unintended consequence.
I'm wondering too if I know that Health Research BC is a signatory of DORA, and we've looked at evaluation in ways that might support more a better environment. Research, Linda, is that something that you might be able to speak to?
Yeah, I think with funding agencies, signing on the DORA and using that principles in their awards and grant review, it is very important. It's one step forward. I do think that reviewers also need more support in learning and understanding how best to apply those principles. I think, and I'm actually really interested in hearing some of the audience's feedback on that as well, because I'm sure many of you have also sit on research grant review panels that, when you're applying for the DORA principles to review a grant, and oftentimes the way that, individual reviewers apply the principles slightly different, and the conversation can go many different ways. So I think, one step forward, for a funding agency to consider is really to start looking at, some of the principles and provide better guidance and training and support so that we can standardize. That may not be the right word, but, to make the process a bit more user-friendly for reviewers so that we can use it to apply it to evaluate applications in a more equitable manner.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you both so much. And I'm wondering, Gail, is there anything else that you'd like to add to that conversation?
That covers so much. I think the only other thing I would probably add is that as a funder, we work closely with other funders to share and learn as well. And we're part of a couple of different international networks, Transforming Evidence Funders Network, which I think just changed their name to Implement. Kevin, I can never remember what the new name is. I go by Transforming Evidence Funders Network, and then there's the Research on Research Institute. So we are learning a lot through working with other funders on various things about how do we improve our own practices and what are others doing. So there's lots that we can be doing and lots we're going to be exploring over the next number of years.
I think it was Impact Funders Forum.
Thank you. I still have to get that one straight.
That's relatively new. We do have one more question, and I think we'll need to wrap up. Are there barriers and challenges that we're aware of as Health Research BC that would constrain moving toward open access or open science, sorry, or more open approach to science?
I mean, I would point to, like the sort of, if we're thinking about researchers, academic sort of university-based researchers, then I do think that, we need to be cognizant like that, of who's making judgments about promotion and tenure. And that's within the universities that those judgments are being made. And I think open science and the appetite for for embracing open science is going to be fed in large part by like seeing explicit recognition and support for open science practices and principles in that sort of reward system for university-based researchers. So I think the universities, we have to keep encouraging and supporting universities to move in that direction and to implement that in the context of the sort of academic rewards structure.
Yeah, that's very, very helpful insight too. And I'm wondering, as we're getting close to the end of timing, does anyone have anything additional they feel they would like to add, either adding on to what Sterling just talked about or anything that we didn't cover in the question period before we wrap things up?
Just to build on Sterling and not trying to put out just a platitude, change is really hard. It always is hard, and we always expect it so much easier. Like, just do this, it's going to be fine. But can you even stop taking that second piece of chocolate when it's sitting in front of you? It's not easy to do things when you want to change a behavior. We just have to really just think about what's the one thing I can do today that's going to help move towards open science, and just take those little steps towards it, and we'll get there.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Kevin, who is going to close things off for today's webinar. Thank you to the three of you for being here, and thank you for the participation from everyone in the questions that were asked. But yes, passing it on to Kevin.
Thank you all. I really appreciate that. What a stimulating discussion, and it's far from over. But that brings us to time. So just a reminder that a recording of this webinar will be available online from Health Research BC in the coming weeks. You can find that at healthresearchbc.ca/KT-webinars. Here you'll find 8 years worth of KT Connects content focused on knowledge translation skills and best practices. And this also brings us to a hiatus for KT Connects for a while. So we will now be pausing the series to evaluate its impact and look at opportunities for knowledge sharing at Health Research BC and Arthritis Research Canada. So please do stay tuned for that. We encourage you to visit our archive of nearly a decade worth of recorded KT Connects webinars and to share this resource broadly with your networks of peers and colleagues. Thank you for your time and your interest throughout our journey here with KT Connects. We hope this series you found informative, inspiring, and encouraging in your knowledge translation practice. Your feedback is incredibly important to us. So a link to a very brief survey will launch immediately after this webinar ends and will be sent to you by email as well. So please take a few minutes to share your thoughts about this webinar, about the Open Science series, about KT Connects webinars in general. If you have thoughts about what you like about KT Connects, what you might like to see from us in the future, we'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. So thank you again for taking the time in advance to complete that survey. And with that, take care, everyone. Have a great day, and we hope to connect with you again soon.